Welcome to How Is This Legal? Where in each episode we crack open the books to find outlandish legislation and regulations that make you ask, how is this legal? If you like what you hear, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your family and friends. Here to break down what these laws mean to you is your host, Kyle Lorraine.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Kyle, I'm your host, and this is How Is This Legal? We have a really exciting show planned for you all today. Today's going to be a little bit different than our usual topics because most of them are either focused on the law or something that's loosely related to the law, but today we're going to be talking about health and fitness, specifically how to deal with the stress of being a law student and eventually a lawyer or any job that is sort of high stress and a relative stress environment. So really anything that, you're thinking a lot, maybe if you're not moving around, you're sitting at a desk, it all kind of creates a perfect storm for you to be really stressed out, maybe let go of your diet, gain some extra weight, different things like that. So I have a guest here, one of my colleagues, Mr. Zach Sandifer. Him and I are both pretty passionate about sort of health and fitness, certainly in the minority among a lot of our friends and peers and stuff like that. But we find that when we're eating better and getting better sleep and making all these things sort of a priority, that, you have the improved cognitive function, you feel better, you just have more energy, you're in a better mood. So we wanted to share some of the things that we've picked up over the years that seem to work pretty good for us. We encourage anyone to sort of seek their own advice and find out what works best for them, because nutrition is one of those things that's kind of like religion. There's really strongly held beliefs about, what works, what doesn't. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that we've found that do work and don't work for us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Zach Sandifer. Zach, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Kyle. It's good to be on here. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I know. You're like herding cats trying to get you on here.
Yeah. Well, you talk about that busy lifestyle and busy work schedule, and it is definitely busy. So sometimes it's hard to find extra time to do something like this, but I'm glad it finally happened for us.
For sure. So speaking of busy, so I know like last semester you and I were both just kind of cram-packed with classes, and I've sort of slowed down a little bit. I took one less class. My classes are a little bit easier, but there's still like that time requirement, in terms of going to class and you're reading and getting ready for class. So what are some of the things that, and you work a few days a week as well at a law firm down here. I work remotely. So, a few things we're kind of juggling, this podcast, different stuff like that. So what are some of the things you do to stay in shape and to try and stay healthy dealing with all these things?
Well, I think first off, a good starting point is to talk a little bit about my background and some of this stuff. So just so the viewers know where this stuff's coming from, I'm by no means a professional in fitness and nutrition. I don't have a degree in it, anything like that. I actually studied history in my undergrad, and then, of course, now I'm currently a law student. I was a former high school history teacher. But that being said, I have been training in bodybuilding for approximately, I started when I was about 16. I'm 28 now, but I really don't count those first 2 years. I was kind of just messing around. But once I turned about 18 is when I really started getting into the fitness and as well as the nutrition aspect of it. And it's been a really long journey, but over the course of the past decade, I have learned a fair amount about diet, nutrition, proper sleep schedule, proper training schedule. And I will say that implementing these things into my lifestyle has worked wonders in terms of like changing my life for the better. So I'd like to share a lot of that knowledge with you guys today. And maybe Kyle and I can flesh some of this stuff out and help you guys to help yourselves as well.
Perfect. I think one of the things I want to touch on real quick, you talked about how the first couple of years of training and sort of like, I don't know about you, but whenever I started training, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have any sort of programming. I was just kind of doing, the whole chest and triceps, back and biceps sort of deal, each couple days or whatever. Wasn't really hitting legs, wasn't focusing on core, mobility, all these things that I've learned over the years that really help to create like a total physique, really. You can't just focus on one part. And one of the things that I neglected completely when I started was diet. I remember I used to I would work out and just assume that I could eat anything. You'd get done working out and you and your friends would go to like McDonald's or Burger King. And I think a big misconception or, something that's pretty known, but like working out for an hour and a half, even if you're like busting your ass, if you go have like a double cheeseburger and fries, you're going to definitely be taking in more calories than you just burned. So, I mean, you are burning a lot when you're working out and you're helping your body gain more muscle, which is going to increase your metabolism. But the nutrition part is easily the most important aspect of it. So when did you sort of pick up a healthier diet? Was it after those first 2 years of training, or is that something that sort of slowly came?
Well, yeah, like you said, those first 2 years were kind of just, I guess, getting my feet wet, so to speak. Actually, the reason I started training was just because I was a small little nerdy kid, and I was into the books and that sort of a thing, but I wasn't too into sports until I was a little bit older. And by that time, I think I weighed around like 140 something in high school, and I was just too small to make the football team, that sort of a thing. And so, I thought to myself, I don't really want to be this guy. I want to be the big guy, like everyone wants to be in high school and be the jock or whatever. So I started training at that point in time. And at that time, like you were saying, it was all about just trying to get big, and you do, the 3 sets of 10. And I started reading some of the bodybuilding magazines and started getting into some different types of training, that sort of a thing. But really the nutrition was on the back burner for me for, several years. Even the 2 years later, once I actually started getting more serious about the training, the nutrition at that point in time was still just not, it was just not where it needed to be. And I think to an extent, like you were saying, when you're first starting out, you can, to some extent, neglect the nutrition a little bit, just because you're going to get some of those so-called noob gains or whatever. But by no means, if you neglect that nutrition, are your gains going to be optimal? You're not going to feel as good as you otherwise would, and that sort of a thing. So I think it was about, I was about 20 or so when I started to get a little bit more worried about the nutrition. And at first, that really just came in the form of trying to take in more calories, because like I said, I was a small kid, scrawny little kid. It was very, I guess you could call it a hard gainer, as some people in the fitness industry use. It was very difficult for me to break out of that kind of smaller frame and put on a little bit of muscle mass. So I guess at first, one of the big things I started doing was just realizing that I needed to eat protein, and just trying to eat more protein and basically take in more calories in general. Other than that, that was about as sophisticated as my nutrition plan was at that time. So,
Yeah, and I definitely had sort of a similar deal where, it took me a little bit to get to the nutrition side. I actually have a little bit of a different story. I started working out consistently. I think it was my sophomore year of college. I had sort of dabbled in high school and stuff like that, where I would do, maybe a couple months training, and then I would lose interest, or get busy with work or whatever, and then I would get out of it, maybe cancel the gym membership, that kind of thing. But it wasn't until like my sophomore year, actually I think it was my junior year of college, I was drinking a lot, eating terrible food, gained a lot of weight. I think I weighed like 185, maybe like 190 at my biggest, and I had a complete different body composition than I do now, because right now I'm at like 160 roughly, but I look completely different than I did weighing, 160, 170, with having no upper body, no sort of legs, nothing. It was just a lot of, fat at my midsection. I held it all right there. I was having a lot of health problems too. I had to go to the emergency room a couple times because like I had like an esophageal spasm. So my esophagus like seized up because I was eating such bad food, and my body was just like kind of, rejecting everything that I was putting in, because I wasn't putting in any good food. I wasn't doing anything to make it want to work correctly. So I realized it was time for a change, and I started working out, and I did the whole like the meal prep deal, which I've never been a big meal prepper. I know it works for some people. I know you do it. We were talking about it earlier before we started the episode. But we would just do like the whole like, chicken and rice and broccoli, the traditional bro bodybuilder diet. And after a while, man, I got so sick of chicken and broccoli that like I just couldn't do it. So like
I think haven't we all on that one?
Definitely. So I was just eating, like we would do like the whole like cheat day thing where, we'd eat good for 5 days a week, and then like the weekend it just all goes to shit. And I wasn't getting like really consistent results, and it kind of took me moving away, graduating college, and then moving back home for a little bit before law school. It's like when I really got into it. And even then it was like I still had a lot to learn in terms of, what is actually good for you. I bought into the whole like supplement craze, like super heavy. Like I was a rep for a supplement company or a brand ambassador or whatever for a while, a few months, and like I was really into it. And then I started learning more and more about how, the supplements aren't regulated and a lot of them aren't really that good for you. A lot of them don't really do anything. So my focus lately has just been on whole foods and trying to eat a lot of vegetables and high quality meat and things like that. And I definitely feel like it makes a huge improvement when you prioritize the diet over everything else, because the training is a good component to sculpt your body. But in terms of like how your body works and health and like staying alive, I heard something the other day. I'm kind of rambling here, but I heard something the other day. It was talking about how I can't remember what it was. It was talking about how like you take care of like your car and your house in terms of like cleaning it and fixing it up, but you can get a new car or a new house, but you only have one body for the rest of your life. So it's definitely something you should take into consideration instead of just constantly like testing the limits of, how much you can drink or how long you can eat bad food before it's time for a change. So yeah, like the sort of epiphany I had was, I was overweight and was unhappy, and it took a long time. It was a long process to get to where I'm at now. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that whenever people do start working out or they do start on a fitness and, sort of diet routine, you got to learn, you kind of have to learn by mistake. You got to figure out what works for you, what doesn't. Like if you're one of those people that just eats whatever you want now, and then you try to jump into like just a sort of a keto style diet where you're eating just meat and vegetables, it's probably not going to be very sustainable for you. You have to want to do it for the right reasons. You can't just do it because you know that cutting out carbs is going to help you lose a little fat,
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the biggest pitfalls that a lot of people face, both in fitness and nutrition. A lot of people people want fast results. They don't want to hear that it takes time and that you're going to have to develop these habits. They want to go 0 to 60. So what do? I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to start working out 6 days a week, and I'm going to, completely change my diet. Like you mentioned, a ketogenic diet or some of the more extreme forms. I would consider that one of the more extreme forms of dieting. And that is just not sustainable to the average person, especially someone who's not trained and kind of developed some of that willpower and discipline that it takes to stick with a particular diet like that. And as I said for myself, it's been years, and my transformation is by no means complete in terms of how my diet's been evolving and that sort of a thing. I didn't wake up one day and just switch to, eating certain things. Like I said, at first came in the form of, hey, I'll have a little bit more protein. And then it came in the form of, oh, I need some healthy fats in there. And then it came in the form of, oh, maybe this, like some of these refined carbohydrates aren't as great. And I would say probably one of the most recent things is getting myself to eat those vegetables, man, because that's something that's so easy to overlook. Like you were saying earlier, the chicken and rice meal. Every bodybuilder, most people who have gotten into fitness have looked at that, and you could throw a little bit of broccoli in with it, and that's what I used to do. But a couple pieces of broccoli is not enough vegetables. You need to have more vegetables in your diet, and it's something that's really easy to overlook. So yeah, I do think that that's one of the biggest pitfalls is people just try to go 0 to 60 with it, and I think the best way to approach it is just to see it as a slow transformation and tell yourself, I'm going to do one thing at a time. We'll set small goals and make baby steps for it. And before you know it, 5-10 years go by and you're like, wow, my diet has come a very long way. And I think about nutrition and food completely differently than I used to. And I think that's probably the best way to approach it.
I never understood why everyone, when they start working out, it always seems that like they jump to the most extreme possible like form of working out.
It's fast results, man. They want those. They don't want to take time. They want fast results.
I agree, but like we don't do that with anything else in our life. Like when you start a home renovation project, you start by like figuring out what you want to do. You don't just go in with a sledgehammer and knock every wall down. Like you got to figure out how you're going to put it back together, what materials you're going to use, how much money you want to spend, all those kind of things.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Or like I analogize it to like school as well, like a degree. Like when you first start like a semester or a school year, like you have like, sort of a minimal amount of homework. You're getting comfortable with the material, especially at the beginning of a program like law school or whatever. They get you comfortable with the material, and then you get a little bit more work added incrementally. It's not like the first day you start, you have to do an all-nighter to write a 25-page paper. So I never understood why people start this like, transformation quote unquote, and they think the first thing they should do is go out and run 3 miles, even though they haven't ran in years and they have, terrible mechanics and they hate running. Like, for example, like Abby and I, my girlfriend, we walk a lot, just like even a short amount of time. Like we'll go to that campus lake by the law school and just do like a lap around that. And it's like 1.5 miles, 2 miles, something like that altogether. I think it's closer to 1.5 miles. But I mean, just getting like your steps in, your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenics, just getting like more movement in throughout the day, like it adds up. Like if you get because I wear the Apple Watch, not everybody does, or like a fitness tracker, but even just like, parking further away in the parking lot, or, those little things really do add up, and it's adopting a lifestyle. It's not just a one-time fix.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think another thing, not only is that a pitfall because it's not sustainable, let's say it is sustainable for you and you're able to stick with something like that. So let's throw an example out there. And I saw this workout plan several years ago on bodybuilding.com, and it was the squat every day plan. So you're going to squat 7 days a week. And it's like, okay, great. Say you're untrained and you start doing that, and, given you don't get hurt and that sort of a thing, which is quite likely if you adopt some sort of extreme training form like that. But the question is, after that, you just went 0 to 60, and now where do you go? You start squatting twice a day. You start squatting 3 times a day, because the whole thing is your body will adapt to whatever training you're throwing at it. It will adapt to it, and it will stop changing. And then at that point, you will have to change it up and do something, progressive overload, metabolite training, something like that, to keep the gains coming. And if you start with something that extreme, there's nowhere to go from there. And it works the same way with diet too. Even, more advanced bodybuilders will make this mistake when they're cutting for a competition. They'll right away cut down 500, 600 calories a day, and it's like, and throw in cardio, an hour a day, 7 days a week or something right off the bat when they're first starting to cut. It's not the good way to go about it, because your body's going to adapt to that. And then the question is, you're still 8 weeks out from competition. You've got more weight to lose, but your body has adapted now, and there's nothing else you can really throw at it because you've already thrown the whole kitchen sink. So that's another big issue with that whole 0 to 60 mindset, is not only is it not sustainable for a lot of people, but even if you can sustain it, your body will adapt, and there'll be no new tools, nothing you can do to throw at it, because you've already adapted to that extreme type of training or nutrition.
Yeah, I agree. My brother's a good example of this. I'm going to throw him under the bus to see if he actually listens and says something. But like him and I work out together when I lived at home, and I was like heavy into the whole mindset of like, you got to like crush it every day. You got to go to every day you go to the gym. Like if you don't walk out of there sore, and you're not doing it right. And like, I mean, because I was young, I was a few years younger, and I was an idiot. I didn't realize how important it is to sort of slowly build it up, or like work on the stimulus more than just lifting the weight. You got to work on the mind muscle connection, all those kind of things. But every time he starts like a new workout plan, he'll jump in with like a crazy hard plan designed by like an IFBB pro, and he's like, God, I'm so sore, I can barely walk. And I'm like, why do you do that? Like, why wouldn't you just start slower and like slowly adapt your stimulus? Because like I use the mind pump plan now, the anabolic, and we've done the aesthetic one. And it's basically like, the idea is that you're getting your max recoverable volume like lower. So whenever you do like squats, you might just have like 3 sets of just back squat, instead of having like squats, front squats, leg curls, leg extensions, all these different things. And I've noticed that my legs have grown more just doing like, and that's in conjunction with like other compound movements for like a full body routine, is when you're doing the weights. So you do squats and like bench press and shoulders and arms and core and all that, everything in like one workout. But you're only hitting like that particular muscle group, maybe like 3-4 sets at the most. And I've noticed that when I'm focusing on like the stimulus and the mind muscle connection throughout these like lower volume workouts, I'm getting better results. I'm not spending as much time at the gym, and I'm not like, paralyzed the next day. I can get up and walk around, or like if I want to go play a round of golf, I'm not like dreading it, because I know that I'm like going to be sore. So I found that like, doing a plan similar to that has really worked to make it more sustainable, make it more long-term, and more enjoyable too. Because like, I don't know about you, but like I got so tired of like doing because I know you've changed it up a little bit lately too, to sort of throw in more of the body parts during a typical workout than you were. But I got so tired of like when it was leg day and I like knew that I was going to be sore for the next like 3 or 4 days or, whatever. Like you just dread it. And then by the time it comes around again, it's like for me, I would start skipping and be like, I'll just hit it twice as hard next week. And you never do. So then you're just missing out on that opportunity to build more muscle and, work on your form and all that kind of stuff. So I think I definitely think it's something that you should play around with and see like where your body is, because like Zach was saying, when you start with, overloading your body constantly, it's going to adapt. So if you start yourself at a lower threshold and just sort of build slowly from there and like keep yourself in that same sort of area, where you're not going too much volume, you're just working on frequency and, like consistency, then it allows you to be more sustainable and to really get better results with less time.
Yeah, I think the whole soreness / intensity thing is a very common misconception. I think I was still under the impression of, you have to kill yourself. You have to be coming out of there sore. You can barely walk the next day every single time, or you're not making gains. I had that mindset even like a couple years ago, I think. And, there's some new research that I've been made aware of and some new studies out there that, that it's not really that much of a correlation between soreness and hypertrophy. You don't need to necessarily be extremely sore every single time after your workout to tell yourself that you've actually done something during that workout. And I think that's something that's very commonly overlooked. And especially within the last few years, I think there's been a little bit of movement away from this kind of intensity level that was required at one time. And I think that kind of like some of these bodybuilders in the 90s, maybe like Dorian Yates and some of those guys made this super intense training style very popular. And I think there is something to be said for intensity in your training. But at the same time, intensity doesn't mean that you're in there for 3 hours doing 90 sets of chest in one workout. That's not what you need to be doing. There's one guy that I follow online, and that's what else is great now compared to when I first started training, is that there's so much more access to information. There's so much more knowledge out there. The studies are readily available. You can look at. There's a lot of YouTubers online that can help you learn about what you're doing. But one person I follow a little bit is Jeff Cavalier from Athlete X, and he'll be you can quote him in multiple videos that he has out there saying that your average workout should be maybe like 45 minutes to an hour if you're doing 1 or 2 muscle groups. And he's saying, if you're not able to get it done in that time, then you're probably not training quite intensely enough. But at the same time, you're not putting in 90 sets of chest during that time, obviously. So
I think another like inherent problem with I think you're right with like there being so much more information available than there was even like 3 or 4 years ago. It's really exploded. But the problem is that like the most famous like YouTube people and Instagram people are fucking idiots. And they're like spreading this whole idea that like you gotta do summer shredding, you gotta cut super hard, you gotta earn it, you gotta be working out for 3 hours at a time, and they'll put these like crazy videos on YouTube and stuff like that. And then a lot of people, because like I was the same way, like looking for information, I'm like, well, this guy has 3 million followers, you can insert whoever in that spot. They must know what they're talking about. But then you realize that a lot of times that they're just good at social media and they've built up a following because they're either like, attractive and a lot of people follow them because of that, or like they started a company or they're associated with some kind of supplement brand or, whatever. It's really those few things that kind of make them have that big of a platform. And don't get me wrong, there's some of those people out there that are giving out solid information, but you really got to do your own research. It's almost like getting everything from like Fox News or CNN. Like you can't always trust it as, the gospel. You gotta go out and look at maybe some studies that are readily available, or, sort of Google and look at forums, find out what other people do. And you just can't be dogmatic about it. You really have to keep an open mind in order to sort of find like the best holistic approach. Because I think it's really easy to get because for example, I used to follow Lane Norton like pretty heavy. And I don't know, he's a nice guy, but he shoves the fact that he has a PhD like down your throat because a lot of people don't, and sort of inserts that to refute a lot of evidence that it's out there. And I think that's sort of a shitty way to go about it. But his big approach is that you can eat whatever you want, as long as it fits your macros. That FYM or IF, you know what I'm talking about. I can't remember.
I've definitely heard of that plan before.
So it means if it fits your macros. So I guess it's FYM. And the idea is that like you can eat Pop-Tarts and still lose weight, which you can. It will work, but your body's not going to be functioning properly. Like we're not meant to be consuming all these processed carbs and stuff like that. And I think a lot of things that people consider to be healthy, like the whole like reduced fat, they don't realize that it has reduced fat because they're pumping it with sugar to make it sweeter and to make up for that that loss of volume or whatever from the fat. And sugar's cheap, so they can put it in there. So I think one of the big things that I've picked up recently is that processed carbohydrates aren't good for you. My body doesn't do well with them. My brain doesn't do well with them. I eat a lot more fats, a lot more healthy fats like avocados and olive oil and stuff like that, nuts, walnuts, peanuts, not peanuts so much, but walnuts and different things like that, pecans. And there's a lot of research out now because like the whole fat is bad for you thing was in large part pushed by the sugar industry. And if you don't believe me, you can look it up because they found that if they put sugar in things and demonize fat, that they're able to sell more. So like whenever you buy milk, for example, you should be buying whole milk because like 2% in skim milk have a shit ton of sugar in them because there's no like skinny cows running around making like skim milk and 2% milk. Obviously it's got to be modified and stuff like that. So like I've found that fat is and this is well documented too, it's a much cleaner burning fuel than carbohydrates. You can still function on carbohydrates, don't get me wrong, and your body needs some carbs or, unless you're like full on ketogenic, like having some carbs, your body will sort of burn one or the other. So if you're introducing more fats, then your body's going to start burning more fat. And by association, you could burn more body fat. It doesn't always mean that because you're still going to be taking in a lot of calories and different things like that. But I found that I'm able to think a lot more clearly eating a higher fat diet, and I feel a lot better. As far as switching gears in a diet, what's your current diet look like? Are you eating a lot of carbs? Are you doing sort of the traditional meal prep where you're having the chicken, rice, and vegetables, or how do you mix it up, or how do you keep it sustainable?
Well, just to backtrack a little bit there, I do think it's absolutely excellent advice for anyone listening to absolutely vary your sources. Like any subject, you need to look at varied sources, especially with nutrition. You'll find it's a topic like many other topics. The more that you learn about it and the more expertise you have on that subject, it'll almost feel like the less you know to some extent because there are so many conflicting sources out there. There's so many different things. And fitness and nutrition are both largely subjective things as well. And that's what else makes it quite difficult with the research and knowing what's best for you because while the research can provide some general guidelines, it really takes some experimentation on your part to find what is the most optimal, makeup of macronutrients in your diet and how will you best function on those macros. And I think that should be a fun process to some extent, just learning about macros, manipulating different things like reducing carb intake or increasing fats like Kyle was just talking about. I think everyone should try out different things and see what works best for them. For me personally, I'm pretty similar to you, Kyle, in terms of I would say for the most part, most days, the majority of my calories come from fats. And I think it's kind of not really talked about that much, I guess, to an extent, just because carbohydrates are so prevalent in our society today. I mean, look at any standard meal that you'd get from fast food or whatever, McDonald's. It's chock full of carbs, and most of the calories are probably coming from the carbs in that, if not also from fats. And well, I guess we'll go into this a little bit, but they're mostly unhealthy fats in that situation. But yeah, I found personally for myself, I function a little bit better on the fats. And the thing that a lot of people don't know, I think, is that if you don't consume any fats for several years, you don't have those essential fatty acids in your diet, you will die. If you don't consume any proteins for several years and you don't have the essential amino acids in your diet, you will die. If you don't consume any carbs for a few years, you will live. you don't necessarily need carbs to survive. It's not something that you need.
It's a good point.
Because your body is very well adapted to burn fat as an energy source. And I think that goes back, and a lot of the research has shown this as well, I think, from an evolutionary perspective, just what was available to early humans, and, is mostly fats and proteins. There weren't a whole lot of, a nice loaf of bread you can go get or something like that. And there is some research out there that I'm aware of that shows certain things such as tooth decay and other issues began to arise with the advent of agriculture and the increased consumption of these carbohydrates. So I think that's something very interesting to take into account as well. But like I said, for myself, a lot of my calories come from fats, a fair amount come from proteins, and there's a little bit from carbohydrates, and that just depends on what exactly I'm trying to do at that point in time. I found for myself, in terms of manipulating my weight, say I'm trying to put on a little bit of muscle mass for a few weeks. I wouldn't even want to call it bulking because I don't really believe in bulking per se. I guess you could call it a lean bulk. But really all I need to do for myself is manipulate the carbohydrates. And over the years, I kind of learned that works for me. If I want to bulk up a little bit, I can increase my carbohydrate intake and keep everything else the same. And it makes it very, very simple to manipulate my weight. But that's what personally works for me. Like I said, that might not work for everyone. But yeah, that's mostly what I do.
And I think another sort of staple of your diet should be vegetables. I know vegetables aren't always the most exciting thing to eat, but maybe this will make you want to eat them. So there's new research out, 2017 study, that found that there's a pretty strong correlation between dark leafy greens and more vegetable intake and reductions in depression across like 1,000 people, I think, participated in the study. Like 990 people were in it. And they found that by introducing more of these dark leafy greens, and they did it across different spectrum. There were some people that had that were taking antidepressant medication. There was other people that were doing counseling and human therapy, and then there was other people that were doing a combination of both. And they found that across all of them, an increase in vegetables in a healthier diet led to a reduction in depression. And there's also research from this year that's indicating that dark leafy greens, especially, and vegetables in elderly people over the age of like 81, I think, were involved in the study. These people eating more vegetables led to a decrease in dementia and Alzheimer's. So what we're getting here is that the food we're putting in our body is literally causing most of the diseases that we have today. Like the increases in things like cancer and heart disease and all that kind of stuff. A lot of it is tied to our increased reliance on processed carbohydrates that are packed with sugar and chemicals and stuff like that we didn't evolve to eat. Our body doesn't know how to handle it, so it produces more fat, which leads to more complications for organs and different things like that. So I think there's a lot to be, there's a lot of information there we could sort of unpack, but I've certainly noticed a difference because I've always been bad about eating vegetables. I don't know about you. When I grew up, like, my mom cooked every night, so there was always vegetables available, but our family wasn't super health conscious. We've all kind of had decent genetics where, like, we could eat sort of what we wanted and we didn't gain a lot of weight, so it wasn't one of those things we sort of had to look into too deep, and I avoided vegetables a lot of the times. So I think that now that I'm sort of introducing them into my diet more frequently, I'm probably noticing a bigger difference because it's been so long since they were consistent. But you can definitely tell a difference in how you feel, how your brain functions. I feel much less like I have mental fog when I'm eating a lot of vegetables. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm very much like you in that sense. It took me a long time to get on the vegetable train. And like I said, I'm not talking in terms of I ate a couple pieces of broccoli with my chicken and rice meal. I'm talking in terms of I think currently I probably eat around 5 or 6 pounds of dark leafy greens per week. And that's been a while to develop that habit, but it really isn't that bad. I didn't like the vegetables at first, but especially if you start manipulating your carbohydrate intake, there's a little bit of carbs in those vegetables and some fibers and stuff, and you will want those carbs, if you start reducing, your intake of like white bread or soda or different things like that, and you're used to having all these other carbohydrates coming in, once you cut those things out, you will find that you will actually crave the healthy things more after you've made that change to your diet. But I will say that, in this past, it's probably only been a year and a half that I've been really good about eating vegetables, and that amount that I just said a minute ago. But you do notice a big difference in terms of how you feel. Everything from your sleep, your energy levels. I mean, pretty much everything. You just feel a lot better when you're eating more of those vegetables. So if you don't take our word for it, I would say just try it yourself. It's not really that hard. Go get yourself, I usually only buy like 2 pounds of vegetables at a time because I just like to cook them and eat them. I don't like to have a large amount of leftovers. So what I'll do is I'll buy maybe on Monday, I'll buy 2 pounds of broccoli. I'll eat that by Wednesday or Thursday or something. And then maybe I'll go get a bag of Brussels sprouts or something like that, or some asparagus. And, give it a try for yourself. Don't take our word for it. Try it for a couple weeks and see how you feel. See if your sleep's improved, if your energy level's improved, all those sorts of things. I think a big thing that I've noticed, well, Kyle, not to mention cognitive function, as Kyle was alluding to, but, I used to wake up in the morning and have that feeling of just grogginess. And I thought that was just, I thought that was normal. You wake up in the morning and you kind of feel like crap. You don't want to get out of bed right away. That alarm goes off. You want to hit snooze. You're kind of groggy. I've noticed that after cleaning up my diet, I'll sleep for those 8 hours and I don't even really need an alarm. I'll just wake up on my own and I feel refreshed and I, kind of bounce out of bed and I don't have that groggy feeling anymore. And that's kind of an amazing thing that happens. So, don't take our word for it. Try it for yourself.
And I feel that way too. And I think it ties back to the whole, like, whenever you're sleeping, like your body is digesting food and, using calories to keep you alive. Even when you're sleeping, you're still burning calories. Of course, we know this. And it goes back to the whole, like, what fuel you're putting in it. If you're burning a lot of fat, that's a very clean burning fuel. Your body's going to be operating more efficiently. The human brain is already like the most efficient computer on the earth. And it's kind of amazing, like the amount of neurons and stuff like that we have, and the amount of connections and equations we can work out in our brain, and all the recall, and we only use 25% of our caloric intake to power our brain, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. Depending on how much stress you put it under, it makes you think about it a little bit more. But if you're burning a lot of carbohydrates, it's a much dirtier fuel. Thus, your body's going to have to work a lot harder. So you're not getting a very restful sleep because your body is like, continually burning these things and trying to figure out how to process this. And, you might be storing more fat and whatnot. But I think I actually have a quick anecdote I want to put in real quick about the healthy diet. So in full disclosure, I was driving up to St. Louis yesterday to do a podcast. It's going to be coming out. Will come out before this one. But I was driving up there and I didn't have any food. I didn't bring a snack with me, and I was starving. And I was going through, I went up to St. Louis through like Pinckneyville, like where you go like up through Nashville. And I was
127, right?
And I was at the town where you have to like go around. You know what I'm talking about? You have to go in like that roundabout to get back on the highway, and there's like a McDonald's and stuff right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I hit the McDonald's. And anyone that's listening to this that knew me when I was younger is surprised that I'm talking about this, because I was probably the most unhealthy individual on planet Earth. I used to eat fast food, like not every meal, but like seriously 2 meals a day for like years. I ate a shit ton of fast food, and McDonald's is always my go-to. And yesterday I was like stressed out, and like that's another thing too. Like when you're stressed out and stuff like that, it's so much easier to reach for those bad foods. I mean, it's proven. Like when you're stressed and tired, they did a study where they had like vegetables and then cake, or like it was like a high protein vegetable meal, whatever, something healthier, and then cake as the other option. And the people that were like more sleep deprived reached for the cake like 9 out of 10 times.
Well, it's a vicious cycle too, because that feeling stressed and tired, and then you reach for those unhealthy foods, and that really only perpetuates those two feelings, and then you want the unhealthy foods even more, and then you just get more stressed and more tired.
It's a bad vicious cycle. I agree. So I had McDonald's yesterday and did the old go-to. I got the double quarter pounder with cheese and some fries. And, like I used to love McDonald's fries. It was like one of my favorite things. It was like a delicacy to me. And when I was eating yesterday, like it didn't even taste good. And it kind of blew me away. Like I was pretty disappointed in myself for, like making a bad decision, but like it's going to happen sometimes. You're going to eat pizza. You're going to fall off the wagon. But like, it's one of those things, like if you if you have a car and you blow a tire, you don't light the car on fire. You just change the tire and keep going. So I think that's important too. Like, you don't have to be consistent 100% of the time. Like, we're humans, we're going to make mistakes. But I've noticed since I started eating higher quality foods and putting more of an emphasis on it, the fast food doesn't even taste like edible anymore. Like, it was seriously like I was eating like cardboard when I was eating the fries and stuff like that. So that was a real wake up call for me to realize like how far I've come, how much I've improved my diet and how much I've trained my palate to want those vegetables and to want that high quality meat. Another thing that we've done recently is we've started eating like 100% grass-fed beef and pasture-raised chicken and stuff like that. It's expensive, don't get me wrong, but Abby's reading this book by this doctor, Mark Hyman, and it's about food and stuff like that. You would really like it. It's called Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? And in the book, he was talking about how grass-fed.
I think I'm familiar with that, actually. I haven't actually read it, but
it just came out not too long ago.
So Dr. Hyman's work. I think maybe he's on the Model Health Show or something like that.
I think he was on Joe Rogan, and yeah, he's really big in that whole like health space. He's a pretty notable guy, but he was talking about in the book that grass-fed beef is so nutritionally superior to grain-fed beef like you would normally get that it's not even like the same food. Like, you get so many more nutrients from the cows eating like what they evolved to eat than the grain-fed and like whatever they're feeding them. Like, there was an accident I think it was in California, like last year. Did you hear about this? That truck full of red Skittles that crashed on the highway, and it was on its way to a farm to feed to the cows. So like,
I think you might have told me about this actually.
They're literally eating. I can't remember where I heard it from or where I read it, but I mean, they're literally feeding them like just whatever, because if you're a farmer and you could feed your cows and your pigs like Skittles, that's going to be way less expensive than constantly having a supply of fresh grass or whatever for them to eat. And so they're going to get fatter a lot quicker, so you can kill them faster, get more in. It's a whole process, sure, but I think it's well worth the money to get the grass-fed beef, and especially the steaks. I mean, they taste so much better than like grain-fed steak. It's not even close. I never I'm a big steak guy. Like, I grew up, my parents made it like twice, 3 times a week. My dad can cook a steak like nobody's business, but even just like, because I'm okay at cooking a steak. I have my good days and my bad days. Sometimes I'll forget it's on there, burn a little. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's like a science, and I really think you gotta work with it to get it down. But even if I like sort of overcook the steak, it still tastes better than just about any steak I've had at like even like a fancy restaurant or anything. It's kind of amazing. I mean, you're spending the money like you would be to go out to a nice dinner, but it's still like, it just tastes so much better.
Yeah, and I mean, while we're on the topic of studies, you were mentioning Dr. Hyman's What the Heck Should I Eat? Is that what that book's
that's
called?
The title.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that. That's one I want to look into, but I think I'd be remiss not to mention this one, but it comes to mind with regard to carbohydrates, and it was one of the biggest influences on me in terms of reducing the amount of carbs I was taking in, and almost not as much reducing, but changing the type of carbohydrates I was taking in. Because, when I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, we had the food pyramid, and not quite the 80s, but we had the food pyramid, and everyone's probably familiar with what I'm talking about here, but you have on the bottom grains, and there's a little picture of a nice loaf of white bread. You got your bunny bread on there, and, maybe some sugar or something, some wheat, different things like that. And that is a lot of the new research is showing that is not what you should do. Most of your calories per day should not be coming from, bleached white flour products such as, like pancakes, waffles. I got my Eggos in the morning, glass of orange juice, that sort of a thing. And I think one of the most influential works that's out there right now that people should look up if they haven't read it already is a book by Dr. David Perlmutter called Grain Brain. And he is a neurologist, I believe. And that book is pretty much all about how consumption of these refined carbohydrates actually, not only is it detrimental to cognitive function, but it actually damages your brain. And it may be a large contributing factor to Alzheimer's and dementia and some of these other diseases we've been talking about. So that was a big influence on me to switch from a more carbohydrate-based diet to a more fat-based diet. And as I said before, I feel a lot better from it, and generally I don't have as many carbs anymore. Now, like another good point that you brought up earlier that that I want to expand upon a little bit is you don't need to be consistent 100% of the time. Of course, if you're consistent 100% of the time, will that be the most optimal thing to do? Yes, that'll be the most optimal because it's 100%. But, like most human beings, you want to have, you want to be a normal person sometimes. You want to go out to the restaurant and buy whatever everyone else is getting and not look like the weirdo and everyone orders, it's like a chicken Alfredo dinner or something. And you're like, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't eat pasta. And everyone's like, well, that's strange. You want to be that person sometimes that just, you don't want to be touting your diet all the time and that sort of a thing. And it's okay to go have a few meals every week. I know me personally, I'll have probably 3 meals a week where I eat whatever I want to eat. It might be pizza. I'm a big pizza guy. I like pizza a lot. Generally fast food, sweets, that sort of a thing. I mean, it's been so long since I ate that sort of stuff. Like you were saying earlier, I just don't have any desire to eat that. But
I learned my lesson.
Pizza is one thing that I definitely enjoy. And, is it okay for me to go out and eat a pizza a couple times a week? Yeah, that's okay. It's not gonna ruin everything. But as long as your diet's consistent, like 80% of the time, I think for the average person, that's probably the best way to really sustain that diet and turn it into a lifestyle. Rather, I don't even like to use the word diet because it implies it's a temporary thing. It's more of a nutritional lifestyle that you're adopting permanently. So you can implement those cheat meals in there to help you do that sometimes.
And back to the whole food pyramid thing. So obviously the government, the USDA, and the FDA are the ones who design the food pyramid. But like when you stop and think about it, why is the government controlling what we should be eating? It's because they're getting the influence from the grain farmers and stuff like that to push that agenda, so more kids and adults, as they grow up and don't question the system, will be eating more grains as like their entire life. And there's so much research coming out that says that's the wrong idea. And it wasn't like readily available, back then. There was still like much more skepticism in terms of how it will affect us with the grains and sugars and stuff like that. But I mean, like, the jury's in and it's not good for you. So I think the important part is that you can't let, the government or, one source or, whoever like control what you're going to eat. You got to do your own research. You got to figure out what's going to work for you, what is good for you based on, different studies, what's proven to work better for you. I think while we're talking about sources here, the documentary Fed Up on Netflix.
I have seen that one, yep.
And like if you go into it with a closed mind, you're going to think it's like way out there. But then like once you start doing some more research, you're going to be like, holy shit, they're right. Because like a lot of it is just like lobbyists and farmers and stuff like that just shaped the entire way we eat. If you don't believe me, think about when you were a kid and you were in school. Did you see milk ads everywhere, all over the walls? Remember the milk posters about drinking
Absolutely.
your 2% milk, drinking your chocolate milk?
Mm-hmm.
You don't see it anywhere else but schools. And then they're always pushing the milk. They'll give you a free carton with lunch, and if you want to get like a soda, that would be extra or whatever. So it's, they're setting up generations of people that are going to be continually using their product, it's pretty ingenious if you think about it. But on the same note, it's kind of fucked up because a lot of people don't ever question the system. They just assume that, the government has our best interest in mind, which they don't always, and that they're just going to figure it out. They don't take the time to do their own research and figure out what works best for them, like we keep saying. So I think like the biggest takeaway from like the stuff we're talking about is that you got to find what works for you and you got to try to stick with it. And to your point about like how you have 3 meals a week where you kind of eat whatever you want, it might sound like a lot, but if you think about it, the average person's going to eat at least 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. That's 21 meals. 3 out of those 21 being not so great isn't going to kill all your progress. You're still, the overwhelming majority of the time, you're still eating really healthy. So you can't look at it like, it's going to be, because it does have to be a lifestyle change. You have to want to do it. You have to want to be healthier and do it for the right reasons, not just to look better. Looking better is a good part of it, but it's not the only reason you should try to eat better. And so it needs to be a lifestyle, but it doesn't have to be like 100% like you're addicted to eating like the good food and you can never stray from it, because then you'll get off it and you'll just people don't like being told what to do, and if you're inside your head constantly saying, nope, you shouldn't eat that because it's going to make you fat or it's going to make you feel bad, and you're always doing that, then you're going to start to like drown that voice out and be like, no, I'm my own person. I'm going to do whatever I want, because we do talk to ourselves a lot. Everybody does it in their brain. So you got to figure out how you get that message to be like, you should eat this because it's going to benefit you. You're going to feel better eating this, not you have to eat this, or like you must eat this because you're going to get fat if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a couple of points there that I'd like to address really quickly, but one thing about the whole government funding thing, if you want to freak yourself out, look up, the FDA and look who the biggest political lobbyists are for that organization, and I won't even tell you who you'll probably find, but look it up and see what you think, and see if it has anything to do with what we've just been talking about and the types of foods that have been pushed on us, for the last few decades. A second thing I'd like to address there is, this kind of rewinds a little bit to the beginning, but probably the most important aspect in general health really is the nutrition. It's not really the exercise, it's really the nutrition. And the second most important thing I would say is also not the exercise, it is probably sleep.
Oh yeah, I meant to mention that earlier.
The exercise kind of brings up the end. Obviously, you're not going to, gain muscle and sculpt your physique and stuff if you're not exercising at all. But I would say if there's one thing that you should do and you're trying to get a better lifestyle, I wouldn't recommend just go to the gym. I would probably recommend clean up your diet and get your nutrition right, and then maybe start worrying about your sleep. And then if you want to put the icing on the cake and be able to actually sculpt yourself and make yourself look however you want, within your genetic limitations, then you can throw in the exercise. But I think that the nutrition and the sleep are very undervalued aspects of the entire total health picture, I think.
Definitely. Do you know Abby was reading this thing the other day that only 6% of Americans get adequate sleep, meaning like 7 to 8 hours a week, eat a healthy diet and exercise? 6% of Americans.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
It's not that surprising when you go into a Walmart and look
Mm-hmm.
around, but thinking about that in terms of numbers, like there's 320 million Americans. Only 6% of us are doing. I can't do the math right now, but if that's not that many people out of compared to the rest of the country, and it's mind blowing. I'm one of the 6%, and I'm happy I am because I feel great being a part of that. Not just because it's a small number, but because it benefits my body and it's functioning more properly. But sleep is a huge factor for weight loss, and a lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of physique coaches and stuff like that, if they're having or bodybuilding coaches, if they're having a client that's having trouble losing weight, the first thing they recommend 99% of the time is to get more sleep. And if you don't believe me, try sleeping more. Try making it a priority to get 7-8 hours of sleep a night. Your brain's going to work better. Your gut health is going to be better because it has more time to burn things out, to burn fuel throughout the night and stuff like that. But you're also going to lose a lot of weight because when you don't sleep, your cortisol rises, and that's the stress hormone, which triggers our body to hold on to fat. Because in the early days, whenever we were stressed, the biggest stressor was that we didn't have a food source. We didn't have an animal that we were hunting, or it was winter and we couldn't find any food to eat. So our automatic stress response is to hold on to fat because we don't know where our next meal might be coming from. And again, not a doctor or anything here, but this is pretty well documented. So if you sleep more, you're going to reduce your cortisol levels. You're going to be doing more to keep those stress levels down throughout the day and stuff like that, which in turn is going to result in your body holding on to less fat, which is a very important factor and something that a lot of people don't talk about or realize. But sleep has definitely been the thing that I probably prioritize the most, right next to nutrition, because I think it's the most beneficial, and you just feel so much better when you get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, not to throw him under the bus here or anything, but a big hero of mine, and kudos to him, of course, is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he's got an excellent, I guess you'd call it a motivational speech out there. You can look it up online. It's his 7 rules for success. And I absolutely love it. I think pretty much all of them are spot on. Some of the stuff he says, like work hard, ignore the naysayers, trust yourself, that sort of a thing. But one of his rules for success was basically to sleep less and work more. Which, I'm all for the hard work and that sort of a thing. And especially in the profession that we're in and what we do, there's a very strong temptation to skimp on the sleep. And Arnold recommends in that video, you sleep 6 hours a day. And if you're sleeping more than that, I suggest you sleep faster, is what, to quote him. I remember it because it's just kind of a funny quote. But yes, I think a lot of the new research now is showing that, Like Kyle was saying, fat loss is largely contingent upon the amount of sleep you get. Not to mention that when you are going to the gym, you're basically applying a stimulus to your muscles to break them down and cause damage to them. And the growth does not occur when you're at the gym. That is only the stimulus for the growth. When the growth occurs is when you come home, you eat, and especially when you're sleeping, that's when most of the hypertrophy is going to happen. So sleep is a very, very important thing. I know for myself, I like to try to get about 8 hours of sleep, just general recommendation. But it's like I said, especially if you're in a stressful job and there's not enough hours in the day. Let's face it, it's the same for everyone. Everyone gets the same 24 hours, and everyone thinks it's inadequate. You're not the only one if you're the one thinking that. But next time you have the temptation to stay up half the night doing work because you need to get stuff done, just remember that there was also a lot of studies out there as well that a lack of sleep dramatically reduces cognitive function as well. So you might be working halfway through the night while I'm sleeping, but likely when I wake up, I'll be able to work much faster and more efficiently than when you were staying up all night working, and now you're feeling tired and drained the next day, and you're still not functioning cognitively as well as you would. So I think that, sleep is just very important, not only for the muscle building, not only for the fat loss, but also for the cognitive function aspect of it.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot lately with school too. Like when I was an undergrad, I used to like do the all-nighters like all the time. Like if I had a test or a paper due or whatever, because that was like sort of like the default. A lot of people did it.
That was the thing, man. That's what you do. You cram.
Exactly. And I mean, sometimes it's kind of fun. Like if you and all your buddies were like staying up, you guys would probably work a couple hours and be messing around watching YouTube videos or whatever the rest of the time. But anyway,
inefficient, like I was saying.
Exactly. But I've noticed now that like I study far less than I used to, and I'm getting better results in terms of tests and papers and things like that. Just by prioritizing sleep. If I study maybe an hour instead of studying 4 hours and get an extra 3 hours of sleep, I'm going to do better on the test every time because my brain's going to be able to recall that information better. I'm not going to have to spend as much time drilling it into my head because I'll be able to recall it easier. It's not going to be sort of like buried and shuffled around in there. So I think it's definitely a huge factor for just improving your overall livelihood is getting a lot of sleep. I just still can't believe that only 6% of people get that much sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like 60% of something like it's like 50 or 60% of the country struggles with insomnia. And I think a lot of it is like since we have so much technology, you're always connected. You always have your phone and different things like that. And one of the things that helped me, because like last year I had a really hard time sleeping, I guess because I had new stress in my life with law school and stuff like that. And I think it was sort of a combination of like having trouble sleeping night after night. I was building a negative association with my bed, and whenever I was like laying in bed, it was sort of triggering my brain to be awake because I was awake in bed, and it's a really vicious cycle. And then you're increasing your caffeine and stuff like that throughout the day to stay awake, and that's still in your system for a long time. But one of the things I've noticed that really helps me is like an hour or half hour before bed, I try to stay off my phone. And I try to turn off as many lights as I can. I'll still watch TV or, like read from my phone sometimes. Not perfect. But I've noticed when I keep the blue light out or like switch my phone to the night mode or whatever, I know it doesn't block everything, but it does help considerably. But if I keep the lights down, I've noticed it's a lot easier to fall asleep and to get a good night's sleep. So I think that's something to consider because we are so interconnected these days. And, maybe it's a good idea to not respond to emails like when you're laying in bed or whatever.
Yeah, I have heard that. I don't personally implement anything like that, but I have heard that the constant input from all the technology, typical person, like, or take me for instance, if I'm at my house getting some last minute work done at the end of the night or something, I might have my phone in one hand, my laptop's on my lap, and my TV's on. I've got 3 different devices giving me input, and I have heard that for some people it does help to do that. Me personally, I find that as long as my my training plan and my nutrition are in place, my sleep will be good. But I can tell you that if I'm not training, say even if I'm like deloading or something for a week, and I'm not training as much as I otherwise would, it makes a huge difference on being able to go to sleep and staying asleep at night, and even the quality of the sleep. And the same holds true for diet as well. If you don't have those vegetables in there and all that sort of stuff, and everything's not there with the diet, you'll notice a difference in sleep quality as well. So I think for me, those two things are very key to have in there. But the technology thing, that's not a bad idea either.
So, sort of to recap a lot of the things we've gone over, I think my main takeaway points for this, like what I would want someone to get out of this, would be that you should start fitness like you would start anything else, sort of slow and steady. Try to learn as much as you can, figure out what sort of training program works for you, what doesn't, and try not to fall into the trap of, I got to train super hard because I want to get these fast results. Remember that it's a marathon and not a sprint, and you want to do this for health reasons, and you're trying to adopt a healthier lifestyle. So you want to think about things like sleep and diet. Those got to be priorities. Otherwise, the training is not gonna do much. You can train as much as you want, but if you have a bad diet, you're not getting much sleep, you're not gonna feel any different, and you're probably not gonna look any different unless you have like freak genetics, which some people might. So, and another thing I'd like to advocate would be to do your own research. Obviously, don't take everything we're saying at face value, because we've only done enough to sort of figure out what works for us. So, go out, read some studies, watch some YouTube videos, whatever. Listen to some podcast, and try to build your whole idea of what you think the most healthy approach is, and experiment a little bit. Like Zach said, it can be kind of fun to figure out, what foods you sort of do better with, because some people do perform better with more carbohydrates as opposed to fats. And a lot of people, I'd say most people probably perform better with fats, but it varies. So do your own research, figure out what works for you, and try to find something sustainable. What would be your main takeaway points from this, Zach?
Well, I think it's a Chinese proverb actually, and it says every journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And I think there's a lot of wisdom
That's
in
deep.
that. There's a lot of wisdom in that quote there. I mean, if you think about pretty much anything in life, anything that's in life that's worth having doesn't come free. And many of these things that people aspire to and that people envy others for having, that person didn't get that for free. They started that journey of 1,000 miles with a single step, and they kept at it for that whole 1,000 miles. And every day they were putting in the work and putting in the time, putting in the effort, and having the willpower and the discipline to stick with it. So I think that's an important takeaway point from this. Don't do the 0 to 60 thing and just think you're going to jump in there and all that sort of a thing, because it's probably not going to work. I think another important aspect that I'd like to just kind of reiterate, we touched on this a little bit, but I think especially a lot of the people who are outside kind of the fitness community look at it and they see a bunch of, it's nothing but vanity to them. All it is it's a bunch of guys in the gym. They like to look at themselves in the mirror, and they want to look as good as possible on the outside, and that's all they care about. They're probably all in there trying to get girls and doing whatever. If you're that guy that's or girl or whoever you are who wants to get into this, and you're doing it for some sort of outward goal you're trying to achieve, it's not going to work. You're not going to stick with it. So the classic example is the guy that's like, I want to get the girl, so I'm going to go to the gym. Going to the gym, getting a good nutrition plan, a good sleep schedule, all that sort of stuff, it will change your appearance for the better, and it will make you look better, and you'll be able to sculpt yourself. But really, that's only the icing on the cake. Having this change in your lifestyle will truly change your life for the better. You will be a more confident person. You will be a much more goal-oriented person. You will have that sort of diligence and that self-discipline to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And, there's a lot of other aspects that I could go into it psychologically, mentally as well in that sense. But yes, you will also look better from it. That's kind of the icing on the cake, and I think a lot of people on the outside look at that, and that's all they see. And they're like, I'm not really interested in that aspect. And they don't see everything that's under the surface that you can't see on the outside. All these positive changes in your life that are just, I think everyone should benefit from these. And that's kind of why I wanted to come on the channel and talk about some of this stuff, because I think some people need to hear it, and they need to hear that it's very doable, and you can start today. And guess what? You're going to start getting better today, and it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to be easy, but every journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Definitely. And as much as I'd like to talk about fitness and stuff like that all the time, that's not our main purpose here. I thought it'd be fun to do a little detour with this episode. But if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to listen to more podcasts like this, I talk about Mind Pump on this show a lot. They're a really good resource. The Model Health Show is also another great podcast, and I was actually a huge fan of them. I like what they got going on over there too. And they're always getting into different topics, new studies that come out and things like that. And it's not all fitness related. Both shows have some different aspects, business and, news and current events, stuff like that they'll go over. So they're both great shows to make like a regular part of your listening experience. And they provide some solid info too. I'd say both those are pretty trusted sources, at least for me. I listen to a lot of it at face value. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope that our advice and sort of our sharing our journeys will help inspire you to adopt a healthier lifestyle. And Zach, I'd like to thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit of your experience, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me on, Kyle. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to How Is This Legal? If you enjoyed the show, help others find us by clicking the subscribe button, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, and sharing this podcast with your family and friends. Come back next time to find out how is this legal?